It's 1995, and Outkast just released a wildly successful debut album. The hip-hop world was simmering and sometimes outright boiling with the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry, but this duo from Atlanta, of all places, was shaping up to be the next big thing. So when they pulled up to the Source Awards in 1995, they were expecting a fun party celebrating hip-hop, maybe even an award or two for their trouble. Sure enough, during the ceremony, they were announced as the best new artist. When they took the stage, the New York City crowd heavily booed them. In their minds, anyone not from the East Coast was against the East Coast, an idea that was reinforced already by some earlier comments, notably from one Suge Knight. One member of Outkast tried to play it off and accept the award, but Andre wasn't having it. He looked out over the crowd and gave a prophecy.
Nobody want to hear, but it's like this, the South got something to say. That's all I got to say.
This is the story of how they said what they needed to say. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider giving it a like, subscribe if you want to come along with me as I'm trying my best to learn more music history. And my cat just jumped on the table, so sorry about the camera shake. The point of this channel is I'm trying to tell stories from music history. I'm trying to learn it myself, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, feel free to subscribe and join me on that journey. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't end up enjoying it. Antoine Patton was born in Savannah, Georgia in 1975, but he moved to Atlanta when he was young to live with his aunt. I can't really figure out why he moved, but it's possible that he moved in order to attend Tri-Cities High School. That was a magnet school for the performing arts. He was already obsessed with music at that point in his life. He called it his calling from God to speak to people, and even as a high schooler, he was really committed to furthering his musical career. He was first introduced to music through his grandmother. He explained, "She used to always play soul music and Bob Marley when I was a toddler, and I just grew up around it." Bob Marley became his favorite artist, followed pretty closely by Kate Bush, an artist his uncle introduced him to. He said that he wasn't particular about the kind of music he wanted to listen to. If it sounded good, he was into it. He was really fascinated with how Kate Bush wrote songs and the production techniques that she used. He grew up in a military family. Both his father and his grandfather were sergeants in different branches, I think, and he said he grew up with his grandparents, so it was a pretty tight-knit family, and his military family helped instill in him a sense of discipline. And it was at that magnet high school in 1992 where he first met Andre Benjamin. Antoine explained that they were just a part of a group of kids who all transferred to that high school, so they were both new kids at a new school, and they immediately clicked and became pretty good friends, hanging out in and out of school. Since they both loved music, it didn't take long for them to start working together creatively. Andre Benjamin was born in Atlanta in 1975 to a single mother who sold real estate and mostly called him Dre. He did have a bit of a rebellious streak, and his mom kind of struggled with him at times, so she sent him to live with his dad for a bit, and that didn't work out. Eventually, he would drop out of high school in his junior year in order to focus on more creative things. He also had a bit of a varied introduction to music. He said his mom was really into top 40 pop music, so that was on all the time, but then when he went to stay with his dad, it was a lot of soul music and funk music. And then when he was like a teenager, a cousin introduced him to Prince, which was a game changer. So kind of like Antoine, he was listening to a variety of different things. But it was rap that really got him interested in music and what could be done with it. And he credits the legendary rapper Rakim with his love for hip hop and his understanding that it didn't have to just be a rhythmic attack. There could be a flow. He said, "I started rapping and rhyming in school talent shows in Atlanta when I was 12 or 13. And although I always liked rap's energy, it wasn't until I heard Rakim that I realized what you could actually do with it." But at that point, he thought he was going to be a visual artist, like a painter. He really didn't have any interest in trying to make a career in music. It wasn't until he met Antoine in high school that that idea started to ruminate within him. And the two of them started performing first in the school cafeteria, and then they branched out to other local spots around the neighborhood. So as they're performing a little bit more, they decided that they needed a name. They started calling themselves Two Shades Deep, and Antoine was going by Black Dog, and Andre was going by Black Wolf, kind of playing into this idea that they were a little bit of outcasts. Their style, their attitude was different even than their community, so they were kind of like black sheep, so they're playing into that a little bit. But there was already another group at their school going by the name Four Shades Deep, so they didn't want to mess with anything anyone else was doing and decided to change their name. Antoine said, "We looked in the dictionary and we tried to get a word to describe what we wanted to be. First it was the Misfits, and it was like, oh man, somebody got that. We went down a little bit more and got to the O's and saw Outkast, and we thought, that's what we want to be. We took the enunciation spelling and ran with it since then." Eventually, because he was playing football in school and, in his words, was really into apple pie and ice cream, Antoine started going by Big Boi. Boi. And Andre just went by his real name, either Andre or Dre. But while Andre was not really interested in school, and as I said, he eventually dropped out in his junior year, Antoine was actually doing quite well. He had a really solid GPA and plans to go to NYU to study child psychology. But then things started happening for their rap career, and it kind of derailed all of those other plans. They and another group from their high school called Goody Mob caught the attention of this Atlanta-based production group called Organized Noise, which consisted of Rico Wade, Ray Murray, and Sleepy Brown. Apparently, they met Organized Noise because one of Big Boi's ex-girlfriends knew Rico Wade, so they got in touch that way. Though it was really at least 3 separate groups, with Outkast, Goody Mob, and Organized Noise, and probably other people around too, it felt like one collective, where they were all pushing in the same direction, trying for the same thing, making a similar style of music. Ryan Murray explained, "When we were working on the Outkast vibe, even though there were 2 members in the group, we all considered ourselves Outkast at that time, including all of Organized Noise and the Goody Mob members who appeared on the album." Organized Noise was doing something different, and it sounded so futuristic to Outkast. Andre remembered going down into the studio, which was really just the basement in Rico Wade's house, and hearing what they were doing and just being blown away. And it was that studio in the basement that kind of inspired their collective group name. They were going by the Dungeon family because they called the studio the Dungeon, since it's just like down in the basement. And Big Boi gives a lot of credit to Rico Wade's mother for everything that happened in their career, because she let these kids just use her basement to play around in. And if it wasn't for that, who knows what would have happened. Big Boi explained what being in the dungeon was like, saying, "There were old broke up patio chairs. You had 7 people sitting on steps with their notebooks out, guys sleeping upstairs on a hardwood floor. We'd walk up to this deli inside a gas station and order the spaghetti special because it came with 5 meatballs so we could split it." It was just a time of them all being creatively free, getting to experiment and try things and grow and become better artists and better musicians. So it sounded like a kind of almost boot camp for their sound and their style, and it was kind of invaluable for their career. Eventually, Organized Noise signed a publishing deal with LaFace Records, which was a smaller imprint run by L.A. Reid and Babyface, which led to Outkast getting signed to the label as teenagers. But their first record didn't come about in the way that they expected and really wanted. Their debut single, Players Ball, in 1993 was released as a Christmas song, which is not what they really wanted. Big Boi explained,
LaFace was working on a Christmas album, and Organized Noise was doing some work on it. And then it was like, LA want to give y'all a shot of, releasing a song. It was like our first song on a Christmas album. Like, man, they're trying to sabotage our career before we even get started.
They originally called the song Socks and Drawers because where they were from, once you hit a certain age, that's all you got for Christmas. They said that instead of rapping about Christmas, like the traditional tree and presents and Santa and chimneys and all of that stuff you associate with Christmas, they wanted to keep it authentic and talk about what they actually did on Christmas, what Christmas was really like for them, which was just getting some food and hanging out in the dungeon. That single did so well that LaFace greenlit their debut album, Southern Playalistic, released the following April in 1994. It was produced entirely by Organized Noise, who I've seen called like the silent member of Outkast because of how important their style and production was to the group, especially in those earlier foundational days. The album was a huge success, reaching number 20, and it established Outkast as an upcoming force in hip-hop. The album dropped at a pretty volatile time in hip-hop, with the East Coast West Coast rivalry really kicking up around this point. Hip-hop had hit the mainstream. It had branched out of its small urban communities, but it mostly did that through these artists on the coast, mostly New York City and LA and kind of associated regions. So that brought a lot of gangster rap out too. So Outkast's debut just sounded so different from anything else that was happening. It's seen as the start of Southern rap, at least in a mainstream capacity, and it really put Atlanta on the map as a potential future for the world of hip-hop. Bomani Jones said in his YouTube video about this album that it sounded like a chronicle of the South. He said,
"There was something organic and decidedly Southwest Atlanta about this that was an introduction to the world of the city that would ultimately become the center of rap music, replacing New York City. Like, this is the beginning of the future for rap." And I don't even think we realized that so much in 1994, but it's clear now that that is exactly what it was.
Outkast kind of got famous for the way Big and Andre played off of each other, with them seeming to be opposites in a lot of ways. Their music was them coming coming to some sort of agreement out of that difference. It's like it's a negotiation between the two of them and their two different styles. This first album, that split wasn't fully there, but you could definitely hear it coming. Coming off that success, the label understandably gave them a lot more control over their sound, and in the midst of that, their image started to change, especially for Andre. He explained, "Hip-hop is such a macho world. In the very beginning, I tried to make sure I fit in. We looked like regular cats. I had an Atlanta Braves jersey on in the first video. You had to look macho. It wasn't until our second album, when I started producing, that I decided to make things more personal." Andre also took a trip to Jamaica, which he described as a bit of a spiritual awakening. He started drawing his own clothes, and then he would have someone make the clothes for him. He stopped drinking alcohol. He stopped smoking weed. He grew out his dreads. He just kind of became more himself, I guess. And also during this time, Big Boi became a parent and Andre broke up with a girlfriend. So they're also going through these like relational changes. Coming off the back of all of that change, they released AT Aliens in 1996. It was a much more expansive album incorporating different elements and ideas. And it was the first time the two of them tried to produce themselves, for better or worse, though Organized Noise was still the primary production team. It was another immediate success, hitting #2 and being positively praised by critics almost universally. A lot of people saw it as them feeling bored with the current rap world and doing something different. Andre said, "It's like everybody's talking about sipping champagne and being big time, so we just took it upon ourselves to do something new. Now we're older, some of us have babies. I want my children to say, Daddy really said something. He wasn't just trying to brag on himself. We're just trying to take care of our families." Some people also saw this album as a direct response to the 1995 Source Awards, which was kind of famous for the East Coast, West Coast fighting that it kind of showcased to the world. It was held in New York, and the crowd assumed anyone not from New York was against New York, so they booed Outkast when they got up to accept their award for Best New Artist, leading Andre to famously say, "The South got something to say." And then they put out this album. They continued the trend of pushing the boundaries and experimenting and speaking for the South with their third album, Aquemini, released in 1998. For this album, they produced themselves even more and drew on even deeper influences in funk and country music. It also hit #2 and was certified platinum only a few months after its release. Since then, its legend has only grown, and it's often called one of the best hip-hop albums ever made. The album title is a combination of their star signs, and I think that's a great representation of what this really is. Remember when I mentioned earlier how their music is like a negotiation between the two of their styles? I think this album is where that is really evident in such a beautiful way. A lot of people see Aquemini as a love letter to their hometown in the South, but Andre said at the time that they didn't want it to be just a local thing. They wanted to be universal. They made songs that everyone could feel and understand. They did get into some legal trouble on this album for their song Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks' lawyers sued the band and the label, saying that they didn't have permission to use her name and likeness, and I think there was also like a defamation thing in there. They were kind of offended by the chorus in the song. It ended up, that suit got settled out of court in like 2005, and they didn't admit to any wrongdoing, but they did pay some of money and agreed to work with Rosa Parks Foundation on some stuff. By 2000, they were again ready to switch directions a bit, and they released Stankonia, which is a much more commercial album than their past couple. It's a massive album with 24 tracks, but as one reviewer said, there's not a single wasted second. Going into the recording of this album, both of them expressed that they were kind of tired of the current state of hip-hop. No one was pushing boundaries. No one was hungry to be exciting anymore. It was all pretty standard and boring. Big Boi said, "They're real comfortable out there right now. Nobody's hungry anymore. The materialism thing is going to be around forever, but too many people have been focusing on that and only that. If I've got a microphone to speak to the world, I want to express my views on what's going on around me." And Andre said, "There's been a lot of good music made without live instruments, but I'm shut out, man, as far as hip-hop. I used to be a real big fan, but not anymore, really. It's not that it's not good, it's just not inspiring. I don't feel hip-hop no more. A lot of people ask, why the change? Why y'all doing different music? But it really came from boredom, because I wasn't feeling the same feeling at all. It was kind of like dying. I had to do something, crank myself back up." There was also another side to making this album where they kind of thought, we're not going to get any bigger, right? Like they released Aquemini, it was this major success, and they figured we're not going to do anything bigger than that, so we might as well just make this fierce, just kind of like crank this one up, do what we want to do. So this album is a lot funkier, it's a lot heavier. The name for the album actually came from the name of their studio. They purchased Bobby Brown's old studio, and they used to camp outside it when they were teenagers in hopes of just like catching a glimpse of Bobby or meeting him. so they were super excited when they had the opportunity to buy it from him. They renamed it Stankonia, which was a word that Andre coined that meant a place you could freely express yourself. It kind of became the Dungeon Part 2. Big Boi said about that studio, when you own the joint, you stay there all day. You never know when the vibe's gonna come. It could be 7 in the morning, could be 7 at night, could be midnight. Since they owned the studio, their recording sessions could be as long as they wanted. No ideas were rushed. Nothing had to happen fast. It was freedom and openness unlike anything that they had had up to that point in their career. One of the most lasting and famous songs from this era of Outkast came from Andre just sitting in his room, strumming a guitar, trying to mentally work through a breakup. He had started dating Erykah Badu. The timelines are a little muddied, but they met at a club somewhere in the mid-90s, maybe around 1995, and then started dating shortly after. Together, they had a son born in 1997, but by 2000, they had broken up, and Andre channeled those emotions into the song Miss Jackson. Or at least, that's the common story, but Erykah disagrees. She said, "I don't think Miss Jackson was actually about me. I don't think so, but people say it. My mom thinks it was about her. She got the bumper sticker and the airbrush t-shirt. I think it says, 'Sorry, Miss Jackson.'" Behind the scenes, that tension that existed between the two of them that really resulted in some great music was starting to boil over a little bit with their completely diverging lifestyles and musical styles. Andre was kind of withdrawing a bit, turning a little bit more reclusive, focusing on fashion more and film more, and Big Boi was really plugged into kind of the hustle mentality of the Atlanta scene and was still really into hip-hop, so that tension was building a little bit between the two of them. I've heard that during the recording for Stankonia, they weren't even in the studio together and would record their lines separately. Where before they were able to blend their music together, there is definitely an element of separation on this one. They both stressed countless times since that there's never been any beef between them, and there probably wasn't, not in the way that we normally would think of it with like creative partners and bandmates, but you can tell that there is some kind of tension there and a little bit of separation, at least in terms of their creative styles. It was also during this album cycle that Dre officially became Andre 3000, and he's never really explained why, at least as far as I can find. If you know different, please leave it in the comments below. Of course, we can speculate though. The most common assumption is that he wanted to distance himself from Dr. Dre and he needed something to call himself that wouldn't like undo all of the branding he had built around Andre, but would also be different than Dr. Dre. The theory that makes the most sense to me is that he decided on 3000 because of the futuristic implications. He made this change around the year 2000, so calling himself 3000 meant he was from 1,000 years in the future. A lot of his music sounds futuristic, so that makes the most sense to me. Leave your own thoughts in the comments. I've heard a different story that is kind of like building on that idea of electronic devices, appliances, where they have like, it's the lawnmower 500 and then the next one's the lawnmower 1000 or whatever, and it's just kind of like building on that. But I don't know, as far as I can tell, he's never really explained it. The group's fan base was also expanding like crazy during this period, something that Andre attributed at least in part to MTV picking up their songs. He said that once you're on TRL, you become a household name, but it was something that he was never really all that comfortable with. He was always seen as a bit of a philosopher on the hill type character, and he didn't relish the fame that came along with being this hit musical artist. He said, all the stuff you have to do, all the meeting and greeting people and being friendly and being, chipper and all that type of, there's nothing wrong with that, but I've just never fit into that. I realized, hey, I don't like this, and it's not healthy for me. In 2003, they released their next album, Speakerboxxx / The Love Below, which a lot of people viewed as the writing on the wall for the duo. It was a double album, but it was essentially 2 solo albums sold together. Speakerboxxx was Big Boi, and The Love Below was Andre. They featured on each other's albums, but it was essentially a rehearsal for 2 different solo careers. At least that's how a lot of people saw it, even if the band stressed that it wasn't like that. They both denied that they were breaking up, with Andre saying that there would be 2 more Outkast albums because they were contractually obligated to do at least that, but he did talk as if he was ready to move on. Sounded like he was ready to start the next stage of his career. Big Boi, though, said that while it seemed like 2 solo records, it wasn't. He said, both records are Outkast records, they're just from 2 different perspectives. While promoting the album, they did a lot of interviews and a lot of the press separately because Andre had moved to California to like further his acting career, and Andre did not want to tour for it. So with this being kind of like 2 solo albums packaged together, them not really being in the same place to promote it, not really wanting to tour it, it's all shaping up to be a bit of a disaster, honestly. If other bands did this, other duos did this, people would be like, this is a mess. This isn't working. But it didn't quite go that way. As Rolling Stone wrote, to complicate things further, the album has become the biggest of their career, 8 times platinum and counting, with simultaneously released hit singles and now 3 Grammys, including Album of the Year. And a lot of that success was built off of the incredible smash hit single Hey Ya, which was from The Love Below, which was from Andre's side of the album. It and the resulting video definitely shifted Andre into the main feature spot in Outkast. Andre has said that he wrote the song while on tour for Stankonia, and it's about modern relationships. He's also very proud of the fact that he designed all of the clothes for the music video. And I don't think I really need to explain just how big that song was and continues to be. In my opinion, it's one of the best songs ever made. It was a massive, massive hit. They were already stars. They were already huge, especially within hip hop. They had released several platinum albums, several top 10 albums up to this point, but Hey Ya turned them into sensations. It was the biggest thing they had ever done, probably ever will do, bigger than most artists ever will achieve. But while all that was happening and all of this success was compounding, they were slowly losing their passion for the Outkast project. And as was typical for them, the next album was different. They were working on a movie directed by Brian Barber, who was their typical music video director, and it starred the two of them. Their next album was the soundtrack to that film, called Idlewild. Both the film and the soundtrack were released in 2006, and the film, which was like a Prohibition-era pseudo-gangster film, wasn't that well received. People were concerned that the album wasn't going to be a typical album, since soundtracks normally aren't, but Big Boi tried to ease some of that anxiety by saying, it's hip-hop, it's Outkast. It is what we've been doing for years. Some songs have a little more piano or whatever, but the whole project was a natural progression from a double CD. It was like, where do we go from here? It sounded like reviews of the album were a little bit mixed. It was a huge commercial success because anything they put out at that point was going to be coming off the back of Hey Ya. Any album they put out was going to be platinum, was going to be huge, so that's not a surprise. But critics seem to think that it was kind of too bloated, both thematically, too many things going on, but also just too long. It was like 77 minutes long, which is massive for an album. Obscure Sound reviewed it and said, you have to be a true fan of Outkast to fully appreciate the diversity on this CD, but Outkast somewhat compromises their classic sound by conforming with some of the more commercial tracks on this CD. And even beyond the bloatedness of just this album, some people were looking beyond it and kind of seeing the writing on the wall. Writing for Pitchfork, where the album got a 6.7 out of 10, Jesse Harval said, talk to you about the future of Outkast? The future of Outkast is either a breakup when Idlewild flops, or if it's a success, a few more mixed bags. Turns out the first part of the prediction was a little bit more accurate. It wasn't a flop. Nothing they did at that point was going to flop in that traditional sense, but it was kind of a breakup. In 2008, Big Boi announced an official solo album, which was eventually released in 2010 after some complications, mainly due to different record label mergers, so groups didn't really know where they stood, and those labels were not as excited about a Big Boi solo record. They wanted an Outkast record, so it just was a lot of delays. But Big Boi releasing a solo record doesn't mean that Outkast is breaking up. People in bands do that all the time. The lead singer will take some time to release a solo record, work on different musical sounds, and then come back together to make an album. So that doesn't really mean anything, and Outkast never said that they were breaking up. They never announced anything. They just kind of slowly slipped into a hiatus that is still ongoing. Andre just got to a point where he wasn't excited about hip-hop and music anymore. It wasn't something that he felt passionate about. He explained, I always felt that I was less than everybody else, so I fought harder. My only gauge to know when something was good was how I felt it. Like, oh man, this is dope, or this is new. So I got to a place where nothing excited me. I kept trying and pushing, but eventually just got kind of tired of pushing, and he decided to step back from music and focus on some of his other creative endeavors for the time being. They did reunite once in 2014 for a show at Coachella that led to a couple more shows, but there's been no official reunion or new music or anything like that. Though Big Boi has said that Andre is always welcome to feature on any of his solo albums. Big Boi has worked in film and television alongside his business ventures in the Atlanta area, and he's released 3 solo albums, the most recent in 2017. In 2021, he did announce that he recorded a song with Kate Bush, which was, as we remember, a longtime hero of his. Earlier this year, he announced that he's back in the studio studio working on his next solo album. Andre's career has been a bit different. During the hiatus, he took some time away from rap, but then jumped on some features for a few different songs over the years, starting in like 2007. But he's been very spotty with music, choosing to focus on other creative outlets like acting and fashion. Everyone was always waiting for him to drop his first solo album because Andre 3000 is seen as this like god in the hip hop world. He is incredibly talented. Everyone knows that. Everyone was looking for him to get back on the mic and say something new. But he has said recently that rap isn't the way the wind is blowing for him right now. He explained, even now, people think, oh man, he's just sitting on raps or he's just holding these raps hostage. I ain't got no raps like that. It actually sometimes it feels inauthentic for me to rap because I don't have anything to talk about in that way. I'm 48 years old, and not to say that age is a thing that dictates what you rap about, but in a way it does. And things that happen in my life, like, what are you talking about? I gotta go get a colonoscopy. What are you rapping about? My eyesight is going bad. He did kind of shock everyone and release his debut solo album in 2023 called New Blue Sun. It was a flute jazz album that contained, as the packaging clearly stated, no bars. He said he had been playing flute for about 6 or 7 years before he put it out, and he started just because he was curious and he loved picking up new things to try. Then he fell in love with playing the flute and started carrying a flute with him everywhere he went. The first song on that album is called I Swear I Really Wanted to Make a Rap Album, but this is literally the way the wind blew me this time, which I think is very funny and very on the nose. So that's the story of Outkast. I'm still hopeful that we'll get more Outkast material in the future. I think Andre 3000 and Big Boi still have a lot to say, so I hope we get more Outkast, but a lot of people online are saying that it's very, very unlikely. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you think maybe there'll be more Outkast in the future, or do you think that's kind of probably it for them? Let me know your favorite Outkast associated memory and just drop all that in a comment below. I love reading those. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want more stories like this from music history. And I say this at the end of every video, but I always mean it. It's always true. Thank you so much to the members of this channel who want to support this and make a more direct impact to what I'm trying to do here in the community we're trying to build. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for that.